Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of Couple of Nukes. As always, I'm your host, Mr. Whiskey, and today is a reunion episode, though it's our first time on the show. I got to meet today's guest at the launch of the Warriors of Hope book in Arizona. I've got it right here, and if you're listening, you can find that in the description below to check out. It is a book dedicated to the survivors of domestic abuse, sexual assault, human trafficking. It is not a lighthearted subject, but this show doesn't shy away from those kinds of conversations. And out of honestly, when I was at that event, every single story was so impactful and it almost felt like one-upping. I felt like every person who came up suddenly had a more tragic story. And our today's guest had probably the one that twisted my heart the most. And I'll let them share that part why. But Ms. Ronquillo, it's so great to have you here. As I mentioned, you are a survivor, and just reading through your chapter, it was very heartbreaking. It was frustrating to see, as we talk about a lot when it comes to domestic violence and abuse, to see the judicial system fail, to seem to somehow support and prop up the perpetrators and put down the victims. And we've even seen cases, you and I knew one of the people there had been arrested for self-defense against, her abuser. So it's a terrible system, and I'm sure we'll get, into that today. But thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me, and I'm glad to see you again. And I loved your story, by the way, as well. So I think everything, like you said, I think you touched base on it, is everyone felt like it was one up, and there was another heart-wrenching story, but I'm glad to be here and I'm glad to share this moment with you.
Right. And for some of the survivors at the event, it was the first time they told their story. And they got choked up and teary-eyed. And it was a really powerful moment. And one of the things that you and I are going to talk about today that really shocked me in a good way at the event was the fact that so many people who were survivors were so filled with faith, were so trusting of Jesus Christ and, really believed in God. When these were people who, in my personal opinion, had every right to be mad at God, to abandon God, to feel like God had abandoned them. Reading your story more than any others, like how could he let that happen is one of those big questions that any survivor has, especially in these stories. And so I want to start with, your chapter walks through it, and I'd love to walk through it here, which is you talk about the foundations of your life, where your story begins, and how that kind of set you up for, becoming a very young mother. And I'll let you get into that.
Yeah, so I left home at a very early age. I was raised by my paternal grandparents, and so they were very old school, strict, church on Sundays, you follow the rules. And, for me, I didn't know I was adopted until I was a lot older.
Mm,
And I really didn't understand it until I guess like later on in life when I started like seeing my real mom and my real dad and stuff like that. Like I finally started to understand, and I always felt abandoned. And it was always hard because I can't, looking back now that I'm 42, I cannot say that my life was hard. I made a lot of wrong choices that made my life hard.
mm,
And that was hard to swallow. That was a hard realization to like really say like, dang, Christina, your life could have been so much different had you would have listened, had you would have followed the rules and done these things. So when I left home, I ended up meeting my husband then, my kid's dad, and we ended up having 4 kids. And it threw me. That life was crazy. He was very abusive. His family were big on drugs. And
mm.
I mean, there was times cops were knocking down doors. You name it. I went through it. I saw it at such a
Right.
young age, and I didn't understand it.
Only 21 by that point, correct?
Yes. So I had 4 kids. My first one, I had her I think I was 17, but I think got pregnant at 16, had her at 17. And so whenever we separated, that was hard because I was raised to keep our families together. And I think I stayed and continued to have kids with him because I had the mentality of you get married, you stay married. You do not divorce. Especially if you get married through the Catholic Church, you do not divorce. Like that's just how I was raised. And so I did everything in my power to keep my marriage together. no matter what it was like you just endure, and that's what I did. And so when I separated from him, I was in a custody battle back and forth, and I did try, whatever it was to try to keep him in the picture, at least with the kids, to at least be a father to them, because I always say you can be a horrible husband, but an amazing father.
Mm,
And I honestly believe that. And sometimes people just don't work, and that's okay. But it was like he was failing on both ends. And so
mm,
now I was having to say, okay, what are you gonna do? Like, are you gonna let this keep happening? Like, so I finally said, okay, let's go. And I mean, I went through thousands of dollars through attorneys, and we just never got anywhere. It was just CPS after CPS calls. And finally, one weekend, my daughter went with him, and she came back home hurt. She was swollen from here down. She could not lift her head. And I was like, what happened? He was like, I don't know. And I was like, what do you mean you don't know? Like, she's not going to swell up on an hour drive home. I
right.
mean, literally, we lived an hour apart. So I was like, there's no way she's going to swell up that bad, not be able to pick up her head, not do anything within an hour. So I took her straight to the emergency room, and, they checked her. They couldn't really tell what was wrong. She was too swollen. So we had to go back the next day. She still wasn't doing good. And that continued on for that week. So every day we were at the doctor once or twice a day, seeing different doctors, doing different tests. By Friday, it was to the point that she was breaking out in splotches everywhere. She could barely talk. I mean, she was like delusional. And we're like, what is going on? She had fevers. And so they finally airlifted her to another hospital, and they had a team of doctors fly in from Dallas and other places to get, to check on her to see like what's going on. And they kept us in another room, like we could see through the window and see her, because they didn't know what was wrong with her. They didn't know, was she injured or did she catch a disease? Like we just did not know.
Right.
And so at that time, I was like, I mean, I knew she was hurt. Like I just knew. And so I'm going to backtrack just a little bit. So like during that week, she wanted to call her dad. And I was like, okay. So I put her on speakerphone, and I let her call her dad. And she told her dad, I am not your little princess. I'm not your baby girl. I'm not anything to you anymore. Now I know why my mom tried to keep us away from you. And he was like, your mom's just putting that in your head. She's like, no, like this is how I feel. And he got mad at her and hung up on her. And I'm like, what? Like to me, that was telling. That was very telling for me. So on Friday, when we were there, when I finally got to the hospital, she looked so much better. I was like, oh my God, she's doing good. She's going to come home. And I asked her like what she wanted. She said she wanted a bike. And I was like, baby girl, when you get out, we're going to get a bike, And they rode her back to start getting her set up in her room and everything. And she coded on us. And they brought her back. And so they kept us in the room next to us because, like I said, they didn't know what was going on with her at first or anything like that. And she was like that. And they said, hey, if she can make it till the next morning, like she's going to be okay. She may have some developmental problems or some other stuff from the high fevers, stuff like that. And I'm like, I don't care, whatever, just make sure she's okay. And I remember my grandmother, well, my mother, I call her my mother. So she was there, and I hadn't slept. I mean, I hadn't slept in days. I was constantly up with her, making sure she was okay throughout the night and stuff like that. And so I remember my mom just telling me like, go lay down on on the gurney on the bed or whatever. And she's like, just close your eyes. Even if you don't go to sleep, just close your eyes and relax for a minute. And so I said, okay. And I closed my eyes, and I guess I fell asleep. And in when I was asleep, I saw somebody coming to me, and they're telling me in Spanish, necesitas levantar, like you need to get up, you need to get up. And I remember like responding to them, like saying, I can't, like, I'm tired, and they told me, you need to get up. And when I woke up, I looked up and I got up and I went to the window and I was looking at her. And my mom's like, we're gonna go. We'll be back in the morning, In the morning, when she wakes up, like she's gonna be okay. We'll be back in the morning. So I'm like, okay. And as they were leaving, my aunt was about to start leaving, and she woke up. And I was like, oh my God, she's awake. And she started to ask for me. And so I like they let me go in there, and I'll backtrack here in a minute. So they let me go in there, and her dad just so happened to show up the day that she ended up in the hospital. I don't know who told him. I don't know who let him know, but I mean, he was literally there within 30, 40 minutes. So I was like, how does he know that she's here? He's not on any of her paperwork. Who told him? And I was mad. And the priest there, or the chaplain there, he kind of was a mediator for us, and to me, like that was not my focus. My focus was her. So I'm going to sit here and keep my mouth shut and do whatever, because at the end of the day, it's still her dad. But when she woke up, I was like, baby girl, like, you're going to get better. You're going to come home. And she tried to talk to me, and her dad started over, like, he walked in the room after me and he started talking over me. And she looked at him and she just rolled her eyes like I was like, oh my God, like, what was that? You know? And literally right after that, she coded and she passed away. That was hard. I'm trying not to cry.
Yeah,
Sorry.
you're good.
That was really hard because no child should feel like that.
Yeah.
No child should feel like that towards their parent. And that was hard for me. Sorry.
No, you're fine. I get it. It is really painful to hear, and I know kind of reading your story, at least from what I get, it's like it seems like he didn't get in trouble for it. Like they couldn't trace it back to him. Is that correct?
Yes, so I did write another book. It's called The Silenced Truth. And that goes into a lot of detail of that. But no, he
Okay.
didn't go in or get in any trouble. Like, so whenever they did an interview, my kids, after she passed away, during her funeral, or like the day before her funeral, my youngest was 3 years old and he could not speak. He had trouble speaking. Nobody could ever understand what he said. And he told us what had happened with her, that she had gotten in trouble because they were jumping out on the trampoline or something, and that she was singing KASSING to her brother, and her brother went and told on her. And so he pulled them inside and had asked her, like, hey, what happened? And told her, and she lied. And so from my understanding, he had grabbed her from her chest area and threw her up like on a countertop, and she hit her head on that. And then he, I guess, spanked her or something, and then took her into the bedroom, threw her on the bed, had spanked her and done some stuff. And she came out crying, and then she sat on the chair with her brother, crying and stuff. And that's all I know. I mean, that was from the interview that they did with Harmony Home, or the child advocacy centers. And that's how I found out. And I did not even know a lot of that until they interviewed the children. So I didn't know what happened. And I asked her, and she would not tell me. She would not tell me, but she knew her mom. She knew her mom would go to jail, because she was like, Mom, I'm not going to say it. She just wouldn't. She would not tell me. And she just said that she wanted us to both be happy, even if we never talked to each other again. And that's it. And I mean, I remember even a couple of times that we were taking her to the doctor, I stopped at my mom's work, and my mom always blesses the kids. We're Catholic, so they would do the sign of the cross and bless them. And my mom would try to ask her, and she wouldn't even tell my mom. So that was hard, like learning all of that afterwards, because had I known before, I'm sure I probably would have been in jail. I'm really probably would have been in jail.
Right.
But you know, I see it as a blessing in some aspects because it's like at least I got to raise my three other boys. I got to be a mother to them. I got to be there and be a part of their lives and really shield them from him and keep them safe because had I ended up in jail, who knows what have happened. I mean, who knows that he would have even gotten in trouble. I mean, nobody knows, you know? So I think that that was something I was glad that I found out afterwards.
For sure. Now, was he, because you had mentioned being 21 at the time, around that age, was he older than you or the same age?
So we're only a couple of years apart. So I'm 42, he's 44. So I think we're like 2 years apart. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so you talked about his family being involved with drugs and the cops, and then was there domestic violence towards you? Did he beat and abuse you, or was it just emotional and verbal?
No, it was very bad. I mean, even when I was pregnant with my daughter, I can't even tell you. I mean, I know it's in my book, but at this point, I can't even remember. I know I was probably 5 months pregnant or somewhere around that point. I was pregnant and we got into a fight and he put a knife to my neck and, you know, he was gonna kill me. And I was like, do it then. Like, if that's what you're gonna do, do it. And then he just turned around and he just got that knife and just slit his arm. And, you know, I'm just like, oh my God. And I mean, he did cut my finger. Like I have like a scar and stuff on my finger, but it's just one of those things like he was very abusive and I just never knew what was going to cause it. You know, he has a child from another girl and it was kind of the same thing in which I didn't even learn that he had another child till after the fact that I was pregnant. And
Mm.
then I did not know that they actually lived on the same street. So it was like a set of houses here, a stop sign, and then another set of houses. And during the whole time, he was going over there with her, and I had no clue. I mean, I was clueless until somebody told me, and I was like, "Are you
Wow.
kidding me?" And I caught him, you know, once before, and that was a fight. And you know, eventually I would fight back. It took me a good while before I finally started fighting back, but I would fight back. And we separated, you know, here and there, and then we'd end up right back with each other. And it's like I wish I could go back and change it. You know, left him whenever I was pregnant with my oldest daughter, and I wish I would have stayed gone because that one mistake of just going back changed my entire life, my family's life, and that's hard. That's hard.
So after the passing of your daughter, you had to continue to fight for custody of the children from him, correct?
Yes. So we went to court for quite a bit of years, and we switched different court systems. So I was living in in the same town as him, so we were going to court there. Well, during the time, I ended up finding out that the girl he was seeing worked for the judge. And so what they
Wow.
would do was they would just keep giving us continuances because if they gave us a continuance, then it would push it out to where he could fight to try to get the children back, to try to see the children. And since CPS was involved and the lady knew exactly what was going on, you know, she knew the details of the kids. She was at the interviews and stuff like that. And during the whole time since I had separated him, my kids were seeing a therapist. So the therapist would go to school once a week and go talk to my kids. They could not tell me anything unless it had to do with me at the time or if it was something severe, you know. So when we were going to court, I found out that we had over like 600 pages, I believe, of documents from my kids of stuff that he would do to them. And I'm like, why didn't nobody do anything? Why didn't nobody tell me anything? And the most was is, well, he didn't get to see them. He didn't have visitations. but he did. He did get to see them. And that's why this happened. And had somebody stopped it months and months and months before or years before, this wouldn't have happened.
Right.
So that was hard. That was very hard. But he did not get in trouble. So whenever we switched court systems, and I found out about the girlfriend working there, we switched different court systems. And I think there was a year where I was married to somebody else. So this is my third marriage. So during the time when my daughter passed away, I was married to somebody else. And we had separated, and that was pretty much the same cycle all over again. So when we separated and my daughter passed away, because he left, like, I think like the day after my daughter passed away, he got up and just left. And then he came back, and I was like, no, I'm not doing this. I'm leaving, And finally, we ended up just separating because I think that just really opened up my eyes. But during that time when we were going to court, it just so happened that I met my husband now, who is a police officer. And thankfully, he kind of knew the system. He knew who we needed to talk to, what attorneys I needed. And that helped a lot. That really helped me because I was like clueless to this whole system. Like, what do I do? Like, they're going to just keep telling me to continue and continue. And I'm spending thousands of dollars. And he was like, no, you need to get this kind of attorney. You need to do this. And so I started doing that. And luckily, I found an amazing attorney, and she really advocated for us. She really went the extra mile to get dirt and find out all the things he's doing, and all, go back on our story and dig into those files of, all the CPS stuff. There was times from CPS where there were so many accusations against me that you would think that I was the abuser, and I was like, how is this fair? Like, how is this fair? How am I getting in trouble and blamed? And there was even a point in time where one of the cops from the town that he lived in, or that we both used to live in, pulled me in and questioned me. And I was like, what the heck? And I mean, the stories that he was telling me, I was like, you really got to be crazy to be making this stuff up and telling somebody this. And I'm like, is this really what their dad is saying about me? Or is this cop just lying? Like, what's going on here? And I went in without my attorney because for me, I had nothing to hide. What do I need an attorney for if I have nothing to hide? So I was like, okay, whatever. And a lot during that time, there was a point where I believe it was about a couple years after somebody had came forward and had told us like, hey, he's been talking about this or whatever. And we ended up having a continuance just during that little point in time. So that helped get the kids where they still had a protective order against
Mm.
him. So he still could not see the kids at any point in time. He could not be around me at any point in time. And that like really helped us. And whenever I had told my now husband, like, hey, like they're questioning me, they're doing this, and he was like, they're gonna try to pin it on you, like
Right.
they're gonna pin it on somebody. Well, what I did not know, and this, thank God I kept notes and I said things to people and I let other attorneys know, but whenever my daughter passed away, that day that she had passed away, one of my friends was there with me, and she had been there with me throughout the whole ordeal. And I did not know that as soon as she had passed away and we walked out the halls, the medical examiner needed to talk to us, to kind of see what was going on, what medication she had had. Well, my aunt is a nurse and my uncle is a pharmacist. So that was one thing that they told me was like, the minute she got sick and was hurt and we went in, they were like, you need to document when you took her to the doctor, what doctor you took her to. If you give her medicine, make sure you write down the time of when you gave her medicine,
Right.
you know, everything. And so I had all that documented. And I told the medical examiner, everything, like everything I had, I gave to them. CPS knew about it. Well, the whole time, I guess his family was listening and they called their attorney and he got an attorney.
Hmm.
Your daughter hasn't even been gone an hour and you're on the phone with an attorney. What does that tell you? What does that tell me?
Right.
And I was just like, you got to be kidding me. But it took me years to realize all this because I mean, I was in shambles. I was a mess. I was in a
Of
marriage
course.
that was the same cycle. I just lost my daughter. I didn't know up from down, and it was hard. And I was like, I was just fighting the will to live. And then I still have to raise three boys on top of it and figure out my life. I'm getting divorced again, and I'm trying to figure out what am I going to do with myself, you know? And it wasn't until years later, well, when I met my now husband. My daughter passed away in April, and I met him in November, or actually October. She passed away in April, and I met him in October. And then by like December, we were together and we've been together ever since. So, he went through the whole ordeal with me because it was like literally court case after court case. And I'm glad he did because I think he was that little beacon of light that I needed to get me through it because I did not know the court system. I didn't think that a court system could fail you,
Mm.
but they did. Am I glad that at least he didn't get visitations anymore and he lost custody to the kids? Yes, I'll take that any day because at least it saves the other three.
Right. But ultimately, you wanted him locked up, right?
Yeah, I mean, I do, and I still do. And like I said in my other book, forgiveness isn't just for him, it's for me because we all make mistakes, we all do things, and I've forgiven him. That's not for me. I'm not the judge, I'm not the executioner. That's for God. I believe everything happens in its own time, and we all pay the price, whether it's in this life or the next. I can tell you right now from what I know about his life, he's paying. He's paying. There's a lot of times that I've sat here and I cried and I thought, how's he living such a good life? And I'm over here struggling with these kids, like I have no help. Like, what am I doing? And then I get an update about him or somebody runs into him, because my family, they live in the same town as him, my real dad and my sisters and brother. Well, my brother used to, not anymore, but they all lived in the same town and they run into him a lot. And, when I get those updates, it's like, I feel like it's always when I'm down and out sometimes. And it's like God just telling me, like, no, you're not. You're okay. Like, your life is not that bad. You'll be all right. So that helps. That really does help. But I mean, I believe that we all pay and he's gonna pay. And there's some stuff I wouldn't say
Right.
wait
I get what you're saying. Yeah,
because
you
there's
know.
there's more coming and I believe that that's God just doing God.
Yeah, for sure. And I do have to untangle the timeline a little bit because there's like three marriages thrown in all of that. So
Yes.
your first marriage was to the father of your kids, correct?
Yes, so the first marriage was with him, and I was with him from 17 up to like 21, 22 years old, I believe. And then after I left him, I went with my second husband, who I grew up with my whole life. His dad actually worked with my dad, so I knew him my whole life. And, I'm not going to speak badly on him. I will say, yes, we both had our issues, we both did stupid things. And it's in my other books. You can read about it. All of my
Right.
bad deeds are there. So I was married to him for, I believe, like 4 or 5 years, somewhere in between there. I think I was going on 5 years whenever we separated. So that was it. My daughter passed away in 2009. So that's when we ended up separating. And
So
then
everything all at once.
It was. It like I literally separated and then a couple months later I ended up, with my second husband and was with him and then we separated and then like I said my daughter passed away in April and then by October I was in a new
Right.
relationship. And I mean, I've been married to that person for going on 16 years, I believe. 16,
Yeah, I
17.
I actually met
Yeah,
him
this year
in
will be
person.
17. Yeah.
Yeah. And so backtracking, what was the time between your first marriage, the divorce, and then getting into your second marriage? And was the motivation kind of like just really seeking comfort and support?
Honestly, I cannot tell you. I think I was just a lost person. I always say I had daddy issues. My real dad wasn't in my life. I mean, he was
Mm.
there here and there, but he was in the military, so, there were times that we'd go over there with him and be with him and then, he'd get shipped somewhere and so we'd be with my grandparents. Everything just was chaotic. I mean, I had a stable life with my grandparents as a child, but that was kind of one of those things that I always felt like I was searching for something, like, oh, I need my dad or I need love or I need attention. And my
Right,
grandfather was great because my grandfather was my dad and he was always there. I think just as we grow up and we're teens, we're lost and we don't understand why. And, in our family, we didn't talk about those things. We didn't talk about why my mom left us or why my dad
mm,
was gone, we didn't talk about those things. Those things weren't talked about. So that was hard for me, and always knew I was like different from the rest of my family. I always say I'm the black sheep and I own it to the fullest because I always knew that I was different. I just didn't know if it was a good thing or a bad thing, you know? So that was hard. And so whenever I got into a new relationship, I thought, okay, this is a familiar face. This is something and somebody I know. It's going to be okay. And it was far from that. That making that decision really shifted my life even more because I made a lot of stupid decisions. I also ended up in jail. But again, I was protecting my children and
right.
myself.
First and
Um,
foremost.
yeah, and that's fine. I'll like I tell my mom, I will wear that badge with pride because if I go to jail, you're gonna believe that if I went to jail, it's because it was well worth it and I was doing
Right,
the right thing. So I'll take that. So that was hard. And then whenever I separated from him and ended up with my now husband, I can't even tell you how crazy that was because we met online. We met on MySpace. So, a little backstory. When I was pregnant with my second child from my first marriage, my sister was getting married. My daughter was a couple months old, and I was pregnant again with my second child. And my sister is getting married, and I see this guy walk in, and I'm like, who is that? He needs to pick up his pants. And my sister's like, oh, that's, my husband's brother's best friend. And I'm like, well, you need to tell him to pick up his pants, And I never saw that guy again. Here I am on MySpace, and I just so happened to see that person, and we both actually just so happened to request, I requested him, and he just so happened to like, I guess he was requesting me or something, and we ended up being friends, and I was like, oh, okay. And so we started talking, and I ended up going to town where he lived at because I was actually going to school there. And we met up and we started talking. And I'm like, when we started talking, I was like, how did we run in the same circles and we never met? Like, we never talked to each other. We never hung out with each other. Like, we didn't probably even notice that both of us were even in the same spot at the same time. That's how crazy it was. So it was one of those things like, wow, okay. And I mean, like I said, I think it was just one of those divine things.
for sure.
And I'm writing a new book, which is 717 Springs of Living Water. And it's one of those things like I was getting our passports and I looked at the time of his birth and he was born at 717. my daughter was born, the one that passed away was born on 7/17. And a lot of my life has revolved around that number. And you think it's just a birthday, right? It's not just a birthday. It's not just it's God doing God. And you just don't notice those things until later on in life.
I agree 100%. A lot of the stuff that God has done in my life at the moment, I didn't realize it is taking a look back. And so as I get older and older, I find my faith just growing more and more as I see all of those interconnections more visibly. And just speaking of birthdays, I was wondering how old your daughter was when she passed away.
So she was 7 going on 8. Yeah. Yeah, she was going on her 8th birthday. So,
And so you had four kids with your first husband, is that correct?
yes,
And have
yes.
you had any kids since then?
So me and my now husband have 2 kids. I have a 7 and 9-year-old.
And then your other kids are adults by now, I imagine,
Yeah,
right?
so one actually just had a birthday. The youngest one, the baby of
Mhm.
them, just turned 21 yesterday.
Wow.
Yeah. So they're it's an 11-year age gap.
Right, right, right,
Yeah, but the other 3 are all grown and married and living life.
right. So you talked about, having a good relationship with your grandparents who raised you and being raised in a very religious household. So how does the pregnancy at 16, 17 happen?
Doing things you shouldn't be doing, sneaking out. You know,
Right.
I was always in trouble, always in trouble. Like I said, I know when I was younger, it was me. It was not my grandparents. It was not, I just thought, y'all are so strict. Why do y'all treat my sister better? Why does she get
Mm,
privileges? Why do I not get privileges? And I get it. I was a wild child. And sometimes, I mean, my sister would be the one like sneaking out, and I'd be like, oh, you can't go by yourself. I got to protect you because she just seems so small and delicate and she does no wrong. And so I would go out with her, and then we'd get caught or get in trouble, and I'd take the blame. And there I was, but
right.
it was hard on my parents, and I know it was because they had already raised their kids, and their youngest one, my uncle, is like my brother to me. I was raised with him and stuff. So I'm sure it was really hard on them, especially at that age for me to get pregnant because, their other kids were already grown when they had kids or, at least
Right.
on their own or out of the house or whatever. But it was hard because I know, like I talk about it in my other book, like my mom sent me to my dad's, and I was just like, why is she giving me up? Like she's
Right.
just like my other mother. She hates me. And so when that happened, I think that's kind of what made me spiral. Like I was like, nobody loves me, nobody wants me. And so I was just grabbing for the first thing that gave me attention or love, and that
Hmm.
was hard because I didn't realize I had a lot of those issues until later on in life, when I went to therapy and started going to school and stuff like that. That's when I started really learning who I was and learning that mentality of like, okay, you got traumas, you need to fix these things. And that helped, but I mean it was definitely hard on them.
For sure. I want to share, there's a couple of quotes from the Bible, and this one is Hebrews chapter 12, verse 11. And it says, no discipline seems pleasant at the time, but painful. Later on, however, it produces a harvest of righteousness and peace for those who have been trained by it. And in Proverbs, there's also one that basically says, oh, how I will scorn myself, saying, I rebuked discipline in my youth, and now it has come back to, bite me essentially. And I think, yeah, oftentimes we don't realize, and I get it, we were all teenagers at one point and we told our parents, what would you know? You don't understand. Or, maybe other people, but not me. We always want to think that we're the special exception. And so, mistakes like that do happen. And so, you've talked about a whole bunch here, the marriage timelines, the domestic violence and the abuse. I want to fast forward to modern day. You've mentioned a couple different books, and congratulations on all of those, of course, and for sharing your story. I think it's really important because, as we always talk about, if we recover loudly, others won't die quietly. That is the idea that we are helping people speak up. And in fact, During that time, during your first marriage and everything that was going on, did you find it hard to speak up? Did you feel like you were in financial bondage or that, like, what am I going to do on my own? Or if I speak up, things will get worse. How did you feel about that?
For me, it was hard then because one, I can't say that like being raised with my grandparents, I won't say that it was that we came from money, but we had money. We had enough to get us by. I'm sure there was probably hard times that I didn't notice that my parents went through and stuff like that, but we never noticed that. We never saw my grandparents fighting. I've never seen my grandfather ever raise his voice at my grandmother. Those are things that I just did not see, And so when I ended up in a marriage that was totally opposite from what I was raised on, it was hard because we were on welfare. I could not work. He was so controlling that I could not work. I could not make more money than he did. Like it was very hard. And then being in a domestic violence situation, like I said, I was raised with the mentality is you're married, you have kids, you stay married. But my mom didn't know a lot of the things that went on.
Right.
She didn't know how bad it really was. And there was times that even if she kind of maybe had like some inkling or something, it's a mentality you still stay married. Like fix it or get away or stay married. Whatever, like so I didn't speak up a lot. I did not speak up. I was always scared of the consequences of like, oh, I'm going to get in trouble and I'm going to be the one. Everybody believes him. He's everybody's knight in shining armor. It was just one of those things. So I stayed quiet for a lot. I mean, even after my daughter passed away, I didn't say anything. Like I had been writing the book that I wrote for quite a while, but nobody knew. And I talked to my now husband quite a bit of like, should I release it? Should I not? Because my thing is I never wanted to disparage him or talk bad about him, regardless of what he's done. Because, like I said, it's not for me to judge or to condemn him or whatever. But I knew that I had to help people because I had met a girl that worked with me and she had been in the same type of situation in a domestic violence and her mom eventually came and thanked me and I'm like for what like what are you thanking me for and she's like you talked to my daughter she got out of that relationship and I think that really opened up my eyes to like your story matters you make a difference in other people's lives and you don't even realize it sometimes we don't want to tell our story because we feel like we're trauma dumping on somebody
Mm.
or we're just scared to speak or whatever the case may be, but there's people out there that needed to hear that at that very moment. And I think that's what got me to tell my story.
So you talked about the kids were interviewed at one point and you fought for a long time for custody, visitation, all this and that. Do they have a relationship with their father now? What have they kind of said to you now that they're grown?
No, they don't. So my middle child, he's like his mother and father. He is my little trouble child, but he moved down with his grandparents, which is on his dad's side, when he was 16, 17 years old. He was 16 at the time. And he did not want to go, but it was just so much going on here and the way he was, it was kind of like repeated patterns of his
Mm.
father. And that was hard for especially having two new babies, that was the last thing I wanted him to do was to go over there. But, he kept saying like he missed that side, like because he was close to his cousins on that side and his grandmother. And, I know that's hard for them. And I never wanted to be the person to keep him away either. And I thought, well, maybe this will kind of like help him see, you know. And so he was with his grandmother, and literally within, I want to say a few months in, he got in contact with his dad, and that just, it didn't go well. It didn't
Mm.
go well. His dad did come to see. There's been times throughout the years that I've talked to his real dad that he's came to see, because of the middle child, that he's came to my house or picked him up or whatever the case may be. But now that my son has kind of had time there and seen, he gets it now.
Right.
He
Okay.
understands it. And I'm glad. I'm glad he sees it now that he's still young than when he's older and ends up in the same position that his dad's in.
Mm.
Because it's like I told him, I said, son, we all have a choice, and I'm never going to be the one to tell him he can't see his dad. Even if his dad was in jail, if he wanted to go see his dad in jail, I'll drive you. If that's what you need to heal, to have questions answered, whatever, I'll do it. But now that he's older, it's like I told him, you can now see what your life would have been like. Because if you stayed
Mm.
on this path that you were on when you're my age in your 40s, where do you think you'd be sitting? And I'm glad that he's finally realizing that. It's taken him a little time, but I'm glad that it's now when he's in his early 20s than when he's 30, 40 years old.
So if he's listening to this, good job. I'm glad. But, so in addition to the books and of course being a mother and a wife, what are you doing nowadays?
So I do acting. I do background acting, going to school, writing books. I do a lot of digital online marketing type stuff. So I do a little bit of everything.
Right. And I really want to get into the acting and what the goal was with that and what that has looked like so far.
So there's no go on that.
Oh, okay.
I actually got in for my kids. My daughter is big into singing, and she loves being in front of the camera and just singing her little heart out and doing things. So we got into that for her, and I just so happened to get invited to do some stuff, and so I thought, okay, let me try it. And I did it, and they call it the bug, and I got the bugs.
Right, right.
So I've gotten called back to a lot of, movie sets and stuff like that. One just came out, which was Landman. So I'm on that one. And I think you catch me on episode 3. And then the other ones, none of them are out yet. Those will be out this year. So that's just that. I mean, it's just one of those
Yeah.
things to do on my free time. I don't do it all the time. I mean,
Oh,
I
okay.
think this last month or so, I mean, I think I was booked almost like every other day, or if not every day.
Okay, so you're slowly making your way towards being in a Marvel movie or DC or something like
Yeah,
that,
something
right?
like that.
That would be fun.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so it's just one of those things I just do on my spare time for fun, or when I'm not doing anything else. But a lot of it is just for fun. And writing music, that's the other thing that's really big on my list is writing music. So
All right. And we mentioned Warriors Hope, which is the anthology that you and I are both in, and then you mentioned some other books. So I'd like to just kind of review each of those for people to get a feel for what they might want to check out.
the silence truth, that is the whole my little life story, kind of like my bio. And the reason I wrote that, like I said, was to change somebody's life,
Right.
hopefully. And then from the small town that I'm from, a lot of people knew my story, but they didn't know exactly what had happened, or what was going on. My town really came together and came through for me when my daughter passed away. And I felt like writing that story, they were able to kind of get a glimpse into her life, or really my life, and how she passed away, and really like God, because there is a lot of scripture in there and how God really changed my life. And a lot of the things that we're taught as kids that we don't listen to, like obeying your parents and all of that, it kind of all ties into my life of, dang, I should have listened and followed the commandments and
Right.
all that. So that's what that story is about. The other one is Ink and Silence, and that's just poetry. It just has different little poetry things. And I wrote that just for myself. That was just one of those
Right.
ones like, let me just be me. Let me just write. Let me write all the things that people are scared to say or that want to say or things that people do that they wouldn't talk about or maybe they talk about it. So I just wrote. That's all that is. And then of course my small chapter in Warriors of Hope is just to give people an idea of that story. I think it's kind of just condensed into a chapter.
And then you've got the new one you're working on, correct?
Yes, so that one I've actually completed. It's gonna have music with it.
Okay.
Yeah, so I wrote some songs and it's gonna have music with it, but I'm probably not gonna release it until 7/17 because
Oh, okay. Yeah, yeah.
I had been trying to release it and let me tell you, everything that could stop me has stopped me. But
Yeah. Well, I
um
I trust in God's timing. I've had like my book, God versus Indomitable Human Spirit, was supposed to be out last November, so going on like a year and a couple months now, and I realized that a lot of the delays, like God was showing me things that I needed to add into the book or different things, and so we all want our own timeline, of course, but I've realized like God has a timeline for us, even down to public when we publish our books.
yes, and it's funny that you say that because I had already talked to my mom and she had already read the book and she's like, "Are you gonna release it already?" Like, and I'm like, "Mom, I think I need to release it, on 7/17." Well, I had gotten invited to do, like I said, I'm Catholic, so I do a lot of Acts retreats. And this Acts retreat, it is for teens. And the topic is children of light. And it was crazy because I thought this all kind of ties into everything, and
Right.
it was one of those things like I'm like, okay, I see you, God. I see you working. And then I go to try to release something and it's like, no. And then, like I said, that this has to do kind of like this year will be 7/17. It'll be 17 years that my daughter has been gone. It's on her birthday. It's on my wedding anniversary. So it's like this number is just there's something there. It's divine. It's something that God is like, hey, I have something for you, but it needs to be on the state. And so I think I'm just gonna wait for God's timing because, like I said,
Right.
everything that could go wrong went wrong or gets pushed back or something happens, and I'm like, okay, God, I trust you. I trust you. So
Yeah,
yeah.
and as we wrap up here, while your story was obviously very specific to what you went through, a lot of the themes and a lot of the circumstances are happening all over the world right now, often behind closed doors. Like a lot of people don't know what's going on when it comes to domestic violence, to sexual abuse, to verbal and emotional abuse, to child abuse. And so, as we wrap up here, what would be your one main takeaway for everyone, regardless of which of those situations they're in?
To speak up, to not be scared to tell somebody, because I think a lot of us, we're either scared of what's going to happen or we think that we don't have help or there's not help out there. And there is. There is a community of wonderful people who will go to the ends of the earth for you to get you out of that situation, to give you at least a little bit of hope or a new beginning. So definitely speak up. No matter what it is, speak up. Your voice matters. We all have a story, and you are a walking love letter to this world. So go share it. Share it, speak up, because there's people that are here that will fight for you. And I hope people really take that and hear that because I know for many of us, I think we were scared to speak up or scared what people thought. And that is just background noise because once you get to the other side, it is a beautiful thing.
And if you're someone listening to this and you feel like, you haven't been a victim or a survivor in a way that can speak up, you can still speak up by sharing episodes like this, by sharing the books, and by being supportive of those survivors who are trying to speak up, by listening to them, encouraging them, not pressuring them in a way that oversteps, but encourage them and be supportive and respectful. So I want to thank you, Ms. Ronquillo, for your time today and for everything you're doing to help spread that awareness.
Thank you, Mr. Whiskey. I'm glad to have got to share this journey with you. It's been amazing.